That end, I want to go to the Lieutenant Governor from the great state of Texas. It's a friend of ours. It's Dan Patrick. Dan, how are you?
Joe, it's always good to be with you, but I wish on another topic. But today has been another tough day for Texas, but Texas is strong, and we will survive this.
We woke up, my friend, with yet another story of innocent children going to school, teachers, administrators going to school, parents and neighbors neighborhoods thinking that their kids are going to come home and everything's going to be fine. And again, we've got a school massacre where a bad guy shows up. I guess unthwarted. Obviously, he ends up shooting at least 20 people, and then he was, of course, confronted by the school resource officer who was critically injured, and then by the police chief himself. Dan, we got to do something, man. I mean, you're as frustrated as I am. You're a family guy. What do you do?
Well, Joe, first of all, this school, just a little background, was one of 860 school districts that was given an award for school safety that had done training out of over 1,000 school districts. So they were prepared.
Did that training save lives today, Dan?
Absolutely, because part of that training was they assigned 2 armed officers to the school, plus a roving officer. Now, this is a small school district. Now, it was a big school, 1,400 students, but there are only 4 schools in the district, so they have an armed officer, 2 at each school, and a roving officer. And within minutes, and the reason I say they saved lives is within minutes they confronted the shooter. He eventually put his gun down. He said he wanted to commit suicide, but he had lost his nerve at the end.
Right.
And so they took him into custody. Now, the tragedy of the 9 students that we lost and a substitute teacher and the 10 who were wounded and 2 are still in critical condition. But I just was told that the officer who was shot is awake and talking, and that's a great sign.
It is.
But these officers that stopped him saved who knows how many more lives. So that worked. But Joe, we need to do more. And here are a couple of things real quick. First
Please.
of all, when I was at the hospital with this young man who was shot in the elbow, he was standing next to the shooter. He was shot, and he hit the floor, played dead, and then when he thought he could escape, but the shooter saw him and shot him again. But he's in good spirits. He'll recover. He's got a serious injury on his arm at the hospital. But he had a lot of his friends. There was a pretty big room, probably 15 students that were in there with him. And when we asked all of them and their parents, they all said we need to arm our teachers. And in Texas, we allow that. We've allowed it for many years before most states. But we leave it up to the local school district superintendent and parents. So that is something that parents and school boards in Texas and superintendents are going to have to look at. The reason I say it, because I've met a young man who was in the next classroom, and he told the story, and no one in his classroom was shot, but his teacher is a Marine, there's no such thing as a former Marine, always a Marine.
Absolutely.
The Marines. And he said, had my teacher had a gun, he might have been able to take him out right away because he heard commotion. He looked out, saw the shooter, came in, and shut the door and barricaded those students in and saved their lives. So we already allow it in Texas. I think that's one step. Step number 2.
I just want to expand upon that, Dan, because there's at least one district I know that does. I mean, the teachers are all walking around with their guns, and nobody would ever try this at that district. But where I am in San Antonio, which is a huge area and it's a huge school system, same thing in the Houston area, they're saying no. So the individual districts have the right to say we're not going to let them carry, and they're basically telling the bad guy nobody's got a gun here.
Yes, and then it goes up to the parents. I mean, if the parents and look, there are parents, Joe, that still don't want to do it. There's some teachers that don't want to carry. We're not mandating that all teachers have to carry, but we're saying that you take our state training course so you know what to do in the case of an active shooter, and I believe that will help cut down on these students who walk into schools thinking it's a soft target. Number 2, look, you're a gun owner, I'm a gun owner. I lock my guns up. We have got to get people in this country, the adults, to keep their guns away from kids. We don't know all the details yet, Joe, and more will unfold, and facts always change. But as of this moment as we talk, there were no red flags with this young man, at least not major red flags that anyone saw. We don't know where he got his guns, but we believe he got his guns legal from his father's collection, and we assume, we don't know yet, that those were bought legally. But he should not have access. So to all of your listeners that own guns, whether you have grandkids or kids, or someone breaks in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day when you're not there and steals your guns and uses them in a crime, if you have guns at home, lock them up. Third, Joe, and this is really a big issue I talked about today, and we're going to be talking more about this next week, and I've been thinking about this as these school shootings happen. We have too many entrances and exits in our schools. Now, in Texas, we have over 8,000 campuses. We have a big school system, over 5.4 million kids in public school. And we need to cut down on these entrances and exits and funnel people through at least one. For example, this young man, we're told, had a trench coat on today, hiding his Remington shotgun. Well, it was 90 degrees, but no one noticed it. Maybe, in fact, I feel sure a uniformed officer who, if he had seen him come through, would have stopped him. And so I think for all of our new school designs, we need to design our schools that way. I think we need to go retrofit our schools, and that may mean thinking out of the box, because not every kid can show up at the same time if there's a long line, like it's the airport at TSA, but you stagger, students come at 7:30, they come at 7:40, they come at 7:50, and they get staggered release. In other words, let's harden these targets, Joe, to the best of our ability, because we can have law enforcement officers. Every school could have them at one entrance or two at the most. We protect big office buildings. We protect judicial buildings. We protect media centers.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do this. And there's just too many ways in and out of these schools.
It's Lieutenant Governor Dan Partick. I want people who are just tuning in to know who you are, because it's very important.
Sure.
He's a Republican Lieutenant Governor, great state of Texas. He's a great Lieutenant Governor, and I'm proud to say that you are a Lieutenant Governor. I saw what you said earlier about the entrances and so on. Dan, I graduated in 1984. I can't remember more than 2 entrances to my school, and it was a big school in South Florida where I went. How did we get to the point to where we've got all this access and that we don't funnel people past good guys when they come in?
Well, it's been a recent.
Is it the school
phenomenon.
design?
It's a school design. It's been the recent phenomena of when you say, how come we don't have an armed officer at every exit? Joe, you and I are close to the same age, and whether the generation before us or after us, this is not something we ever contemplated. When I was talking to this young man in the hospital, as his parents were saying, they used to carry their guns in the back of the pickup truck to school, on a rack. This is never thought of, but we're going to have to be conscious. Look, if these kids are walking in and these shooters are walking in to where they can get in easily, then we have to harden those targets and restrict that access. The other thing, Joe, and this is not talked about enough, I never hear about it in Congress, and I was with Ted Cruz today and Governor Abbott and Senator Cornyn, and I think they're going to start talking about this. We're going to do it in Texas, and that's these violent video games.
Yeah.
One of the parents today said, whose son was shot, he said, here's what's changed in life. So when we were in school, we kicked God out. Families let their kids, they give their kids a violent video game, and they sit there for hours and hours, and that's how they raise their children. And third, we frown on people having guns to protect themselves in our schools. And I look, the violent game industry, Joe, has more revenue that comes in than all the movies made and DVDs sold and all the music sold together. And look, I don't play those games, but here's what I know. Is that when you sit there and kill people wantonly on a video game, and if they kill you, you can just start the game over and you're back to life, or they're back to life. Life doesn't have any meaning. And I look at these violent video games that many kids today are growing up on. Mix that with kicking God out of school, parents who aren't parents. It all adds up to.
Well, Dane, I also think that you've got
a cultural thing.
You've got the anti-gun lobby, which is in many ways funded by Hollywood. Hollywood would not be what it is and the billions and billions of dollars they make if it weren't for extremely violent movies. There are even movies that depict exactly what this guy did today. So the idea that they know the answer while they're profiting by glorifying this does make me crazy. I think you and I could talk more about video games. I played violent video games, and I don't want to go shoot anybody. I think there's a mental health issue here, certainly. Do you know what Texas did in Lubbock? Because that was referred to a lot today, something about mental health and mental issues on school campuses there. What is that all about, and can we do it more?
Yeah, well, they took the initiative to do some pre-screening, a sampling of students. I don't believe they did all the students, but they may have.
Okay.
I know there were thousands of students in the program, and basically looking for signs that they might want to pay more attention to that student.
Right.
And so that is the program, excuse me, that is the program that school started, or that school district started.
Right.
But the mental health care is an issue without question. But in this case, Joe, right now, we don't know the motive of this young man. Obviously, you and I, most of your listeners would say anyone who grabs a gun and goes in and wantonly shoots 20 of his classmates and kills 10, there was a mental issue there.
Right.
But he was on the football team. He was a kid whose English teacher said he was in an AP English course last year, and he was quiet. But as she said, he wasn't eerily quiet. There was no bullying that anyone's aware of.
Right, and he was actually praised because he played so well in some games. So here was a guy that got great kudos from his school community. It doesn't make any sense.
And there is the report that he had a shirt, "Born to Kill"
right.
on his Facebook page,
right.
maybe some satanic symbols. And but my point is, even with the screening, Joe, there are going to be people that get through the net. But we have to do everything we can to try to limit that. And then in the case of an outside shooter who doesn't have any mental health issues,
right.
or it could even be someone from outside the school like you had in Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
But I just think we need to limit to the best of our ability the access to these schools, so we have choke points that get in and out of school where you do have armed officers who are looking at the students coming in.
Hey, Dan, I'm completely out of time, but I still want to ask you this, and I've got about a minute if you can do it for me.
Okay.
The governor today, you today, Ted Cruz today, all mentioned a robust conversation, a roundtable that we're looking to even start next week. What does that look like?
We're going to, Governor and I talked about today, we're going to start next week. We will have a roundtable discussion, 3 days. I believe we're going to do it 3 days next week. There'll be two from the Senate. I'll participate with the senator. There'll be 2 from the House. The governor will have 2. So there'll be a static team, but each roundtable will have different folks. There will be pro-gun people and anti-gun people. There will be educators. There will be teachers who want to be armed and won't be armed. There will be experts. There will be law enforcement. In other words, and I want some architects to come in and talk about how we can harden these targets.
Right.
But this needs to be a national issue, and it is. But I don't think, Joe, we have looked at every possible area that we can explore. And so the video games, Hollywood's been able to hide behind this, and it may not affect the average person like a violent movie doesn't.
Right.
But I look for a common denominator. Why is this generation of kids? Why this generation before? What's different? What's changed?
It's the right question to ask because it's happening now. It didn't happen when we were in school.
And it may not be an answer, but let's find out.
All
and
right.
And I know you're pushed on time real quick. The difference here, Joe, is this shooter, he decided he didn't want to take his own life, and at least they'll be able to do in-depth questioning, find out the motives, find out everything, how this occurred, and maybe we'll learn something from him that will help prevent it. Well, you're never going to get to zero, Joe.
No, I know that,
but we can do better to reduce.
At some point, your constituents, my neighbors, my listeners and viewers are all tired of us saying they want us to do. So hopefully the roundtable will bring some doing.
Yeah, and I'm one of those, Joe.
Absolutely, I know that, Dan.
Like I said, it's been a long year from Hurricane to Sutherland to this, but Texas will stand strong on our faith, our Second Amendment, and our liberty and freedom, and we're going to protect our kids.
We appreciate the hard work you do for us, Dan.
You.
It's Lieutenant Governor Dan Partick, Republican of the great state of Texas. Appreciate your time. We're back after this on the Joe Pag Show. Stay right here.